How's it going, ladies and bruises? I'm Sixkilla and welcome back to Sekimeiya. Now, the last episode was a bit of a roller coaster. We ended up back in Ashiya Tower somehow. Well, I mean, we broke into Ashiya Tower to steal the Sekimeiya or whatever, and it seemed weird, and then it transported us to the future? Whatever the case, Atsuki's with us now, and we're back where we were before we went back in time, I guess. Let's carry on, shall we? Did you see the door to the lobby? What about it? We just left it open. Oh, does that matter? You remember, right? When we met everyone else? Sai pointed out that it was open, and Katai said that it was his doing. I'm pretty sure it looked exactly the way that we just left it. I see what you mean, but please answer one thing for me. Why are we here? Did something happen after I traveled to the past? He looked down. Are you telling me the truth? Do you not know what happened after? I don't, I just told you. I appeared on the 30th of November. I stayed at my apartment while my past self was in the hospital, and a few days later I entered the tower. I have no idea what happened here though. The Sekimeiya was already in the cabinet, and I touched it since nobody was in the security room. After that, I appeared in the lobby with you. Now we're here. As soon as he took what I was saying as sincere, his way of looking at me changed entirely. I finally felt like the person in front of me was the Atsuki I'd wanted to be back with. Wait, you said you traveled to the 30th. Did you try and save Mia? I couldn't, I appeared too late for that, but I did change the past. I had to cut the sentence short. The past had changed, hadn't it? If that was the case, how could the same incident have been starting again? How was it possible we'd left the lobby door open exactly like we'd seen it in that morning? And how could Atsuki have possessed the memories of that long day? How the hell was I back here? I'm trying to understand what you said. Don't even worry. Even I don't understand anything of what I've lived through. I'm not lying though. That I'm not sure it would help if I told you what happened after you left. Another version of you was there, but it wasn't you, right? No, I have no idea who that was. Well, we weren't able to leave when the time came. I'm not sure what happened, why or how, but the lights went off and we couldn't get out. Oh, so this is after the locker of the shutters were meant to open again and they didn't. You remember the recording, right? It was real. Wait, what? Yes, it did happen. It wasn't a trick. It still doesn't make any sense though. I can't wrap my head around what happened. You said that you touched the Sekimeiya in the event room, days before the 15th, right? Yes. I see. What the fuck then? I didn't get anything. I thought I might have been caught up in your travel and both of us appeared in front of hallway B door, the location where we were on the morning of the 15th. But that makes no sense, and look at my clothes. I wasn't wearing these on the 15th. Only my purse and coat matched what I'd worn on that day. You're right, actually. Were you wearing them when you touched the Sekimeiya? I shook my head and followed Atsuki's line of sight. As soon as I saw he noticed something, we approached one of the cabinets. That's where the Sekimeiya was, right? Yes, and look at the wheel. It said 0 degrees. It's said to be cold. Oh, and it's not damaged yet. Wasn't this the one with the crack? Yes, it was. I stared at Atsuki, peeking behind the cabinet to unlock it. He raised it alongside the curtain, and I stepped beside him to look inside. What? I don't get it. The Sekimeiya. It was there, emitting a bright white in the middle of the empty cabinet. Someone must have left it here. Yes, which is what I don't get. When we woke up, it was in the event room, still in its cabinet. You're right. Seemingly overwhelmed, Atsuki covered his hand with his sleeve and brought the Sekimeiya out. It's set to 0 degrees, but the cabinet isn't cold at all. It could have been set just now, so I didn't have enough time to cool off. God, the Sekimeiya is burning though. As soon as I heard that, I extended my arm, startling Atsuki. I shook my head. I didn't want to make contact. I only wanted to feel the air around it. Sorry, when I touched it in the bathroom, its surroundings were incredibly hot. I can feel the heat, but it's nothing like then. Do you know more about how the Sekimeiya works? I know nothing, and even less with what you've told me. It's working, so if we really want to if we're really at the start of the incident, wouldn't touching it put us outside? Maybe. That's what I was thinking. It should be hot enough for that. The real state of the world was unknown, but I had no idea where we were or what was beyond the walls of the tower. However, if touching the Sekimeiya would send us far enough to escape it, it would guarantee the real Atsuki would still exist, even if I couldn't comprehend his return. Let's touch it. Atsuki nodded and moved closer, while I stared at the Sekimeiya, wishing I was moments away from never seeing it again. When his hand touched it, the Sekimeiya disappeared. That was all I'd wanted. However, nothing else did. Huh? We were in the same crystal room. We hadn't even moved. Speechless, I stared at his hands and the floor in search of the stone that had vanished. This is what happened before. It teleported, and we didn't travel. Oh. That had escaped my mind a long time ago, the Sekimeiya's teleportation. What caused it? Would it sometimes reject the travel? If so, why did it happen then? Wait, no, it can't be that. That time, it was Atsuki who followed my petrified eyes then. As soon as he took a glance at the cabinet, he almost fell from shock. What the fuck? It didn't fall, right? I shook my head. The lid Atsuki had just opened. As soon as the Sekimeiya disappeared, it had closed without producing a sound. And that wasn't all. Over it, the velvet curtain covered it perfectly, making the cabinet look like every other one in the room. Did we actually travel through time? Are we at the point before I opened it? A distinct sound entered our ears, and we turned to the door. Someone was running through the hallway. Could he have been right? As we dashed to the door, I wondered. Were the walls of the hallway bright and elegant, or dark and dirty? At the same time, we gripped the knob and burst through the door. Immediately, we were forced to cover our faces. It didn't make any sense, but the smoke was still there. The sound of footsteps couldn't have been a mistake, though. So after our initial surprise, we looked both ways. We couldn't see anyone, but the sound hadn't faded away. It seemed they'd run to hallway C. Atsuki tugged my sleeve, telling me to follow it. It was likely the culprit was there, the one who'd just left the Sekimeiya behind, but I hesitated a bit, frowning as I kept staring at the lobby side. Were my eyes playing tricks on me? Covering our faces, we chased behind the sound. Very little smoke remained, so it was easy to avoid breathing it until we got to the clean hallway. The footsteps were quickly dissipating in the distance. We looked at each other to verify that we'd both heard them going up the stairs. We ran to them and were met with the grey door fully open. Early on the 15th, Katai had acted surprised to see it unlocked. But there was he at the moment. Where was he at the moment if not running up the floors? We stepped onto the second floor. It was a scene I thought I wouldn't see again, causing my face to unconsciously screw up in disgust. I couldn't believe I was circling those floors again, but as I did, my mind went back to the door, to the lobby. After leaving the crystal room, it had looked more open than before. That was strange because Atsuki had said, the way we'd left it was just how it had been in the morning, before Sai had opened it all the way. However, the most important detail had been higher up, above the 3 sleeping bodies. I hadn't been able to give it a good look, but the camera's lens had seemed to reflect the light of the crystal room. Then, I looked at the other lenses and thought that they more clearly had smoke on them. As we ran as fast as we could, I was amazed by the energy I had. Before touching the Sekimeiya, I had difficulty even staying steady. I had no idea who we were following, but Naomi and Katai were the likely choices. Why were they running up? It had all happened at once, after we'd touched the disappearing Sekimeiya. What the hell had that been about? Atsuki had once told me that he'd seen it teleport to its cabinet, and it seemed to resolve the doubt from earlier. It had just teleported to the event room, which is why it had been there when we'd woken up. So the important question was, what else the disappearance implied? The cabinet's reversion to its previous state revealed a secondary effect. After a while, the mesh of footsteps began to sound distorted. We were on the 3rd floor and I tried to sharpen my hearing. What exactly was I hearing? The footsteps ahead, mine and Atsuki's. So then, why did it sound as if there were more? The echo could have been messing with me, but it seemed as if another pair of footsteps were running just behind us. We hadn't let out a single word since leaving the crystal floor. When we stepped on the 6th floor, a sound dominated the air. As we'd feared, only one door could have closed, found on the other side of the floor. We didn't slow down until the attic's entrance was in front of us. Panting, Atsuki grabbed the doorknob, but he couldn't get it to open. Damn it! It was locked. As we stared in defeat, I realized nobody was trying to catch up to us, so I took the time to sort out my thoughts. I suddenly remembered something and looked at my waist. My purse was still there, so I unzipped it and looked inside. Immediately, I took something out and showed it to Atsuki. What? Why do you have it? I don't know. I found it when I entered the tower, in the mechanical room. I found the rusty key in a drawer in the security room as well, but how is it possible I still have them when my clothes completely changed? It didn't make any sense. But I could open the attic. I inserted the key into the keyhole without wasting any more time. When it unlocked, I slowly pushed the door open. The dim staircase extended beyond us. Instead of rushing up, we stepped forward silently, as the person we'd been chasing couldn't know that we'd had a key, and the elevator had been disabled by the alarm. At the front, I began to ascend the stairs, the light of the living room slowly creeping in. The next door was open. As I reached the top, I extended my neck past it. Then I saw who was there. Naomi. Her back was facing me and she was staring at an open black suitcase on the sofa. I turned around to let Atsuki know. I was confused. It was considerably dark, but I couldn't even make out his figure. Are you here? I whispered in the quietest voice I could muster, but I received no response. Puzzled, I slowly went down the steps, careful not to hit him. However, by the time I reached the door, I hadn't sensed him yet. What? Did he leave? I gripped the doorknob and pushed on the door. It didn't make any sense. It was ridiculous to think that it could. However, the door was locked. I didn't even try to think it over. With the key in my hand, I unlocked the door and opened it all the way. The vast corridor was vacant. Atsuki? My whisper didn't reach anyone. Did he leave? There's no way. He couldn't have locked the door. I couldn't hear anything above the stairs, but Naomi was there. I knew Atsuki hadn't stepped ahead of me, though. What had just happened? I hadn't heard anything, but someone had locked the door. With my guard up, I walked to the corridor with the partitions. It didn't feel like anyone was there. I could have missed the sound of the door locking. I couldn't have missed the sound of the door locking. I would have heard Atsuki's movements. And he wouldn't have suddenly left me. It was unbelievable. There had been an Atsuki who couldn't have existed anymore, but he had been there. I kept circling the floor, carefully scanning it. He couldn't have faded out of existence just like that. The door proved something else had happened. Naomi was in the attic. I'd seen a black suitcase in front of her, which must have been the one we'd found the first time we entered that place. I went down the stairs, wanting to believe Atsuki was still somewhere. Could it have been due to the Sekimeiya, which had disappeared from our sight? If, somehow, he had travelled through time, he could have appeared nearby. It was the morning of the 15th. Why? How had I ended up back on that day? Those events should have been erased completely, so why were they repeating? Maybe it didn't matter if I'd really returned to my world. I would soon learn if everything I'd experienced would happen again. It really wouldn't make any sense if it did. The smoke had just been released. It appeared Naomi hadn't suffered from the effects of the smoke and had run up the attic with the suitcase. Could that long day truly have been about to repeat? Not only was I there, but so was an Atsuki who'd experienced it too. How many times had we searched the whole building? It was impossible. I could avoid being spotted by all those searches. What that meant was that if I found myself back on that day, the events that followed would soon diverge from what I knew. The past would be changed, which was something that should have already happened. Who had returned the world to that state? What had the Sekimeiya really been doing to us? As I kept going down the floors, I simply wished to reunite with the Atsuki I'd been separated from twice. Wait. I quickly rifled through my pockets, but they were empty. Then I stared at my purse in disbelief. Why isn't my phone here? Why? I hate it when I touch the Sekimeiya, and the keys that I'd found in the mechanical room are still here, with one from my apartment. Why the hell is only my phone gone? It was laughable, as if we were being toyed with. My phone, which I needed the most, was the sole item in my purse that hadn't appeared with me. But of course, there was another major difference, my clothes. Aside from my coat, they weren't the ones I'd been wearing when I touched the Sekimeiya. Wait, that's not right, not all the keys are here. I have the attics and the rusty key, but not the cabinets. Why? Why didn't that one travel with me? It was the only one missing, but why? What the hell was different about it? I walked to the crystal floor, searching for the Atsuki I'd just been talking to. Both of us had been disconcerted to be back there, and I couldn't stomach the thought of reliving the same 12 hours. Was the Sekimeiya a sentient being, deciding our fate? It almost seemed malicious, but I had to use it to finally break free. I knew plenty of days could be travelled at a time, so we just had to touch it. But when we tried then, our travel had failed. What was the reason then? Why were we forced to stay? Part of me wanted to know the answers to such heavy questions, and part of me wanted to never have known they existed. I stepped down. The walls ahead looked different than they had minutes prior, as the smoke had really rapidly dried up on them. Oh, the suitcase isn't here. I hadn't noticed that when we'd run up. It was the beginning of the incident. They were probably next to no people that were conscious, but it was possible someone had faked being knocked down. As I silently walked to hallway B, I couldn't help but wonder what I'd witnessed. And we never get to see these events from an awake perspective. They're already up. I hid myself as well as I could, staring at the dark end of the hallway. I could see Editor inside, checking up on Isla, who was still unconscious. The three of us should definitely be in the event room then. But there was no trace of the Atsuki I'd just been with. I had no idea what could have happened to him. The camera. It was very hard to see from so far away, but it wasn't reflecting anything. Did I imagine the lane's been clean? And strangely, behind the three of them, the door to the lobby looked like it had just right before we'd run up. Had it actually moved since Atsuki and I had gone through it? I hadn't the faintest idea. Questioning reality and myself had become roughly equivalent concepts. If Atsuki's still here, both of us will try to stay away from the group, so we should find each other quickly. Was he here though? Or had he disappeared entirely? I couldn't tell which option the locked attic door pointed to. There was nothing I could do. The Sekimeiya might have teleported to its cabinet, and I couldn't leave through the storeroom. Still unable to believe the sight of those dark walls, I stared from a distance, waiting for the imminent, long day to begin. I heard a door opening and saw three people slowly emerging from the event room. They were Atsuki, Arcado, and myself, stained by the dry substance. Speechless, I saw my old self slowly walking to the others, facing the dark floor. Once they all saw each other, they began to speak. Their voices were too quiet to understand, but I knew what they were saying. I really was at the start of the day. But wait, where's Katai? There was no tall figure in a uniform next to them. When we left the event room for the first time, he'd already been there with the other group. I verified that I hadn't been mistaken. Katai wasn't there. Then, this isn't the start of the day we lived through. Everything is bound to differ. Is this the... I'm betting that the Shiroya actually isn't in the event room. Instead, Mia's in the event room. And Shiroya is meant to be dead. Just a guess. Could Katai have seen me here? Which made him hesitant to show himself? Just what happened to the world? Where was I? Exactly, and how had I ended up there? Failing to know such fundamental matters kept making my head spin. So everything will be different. It's got to be because I'm here. And the first time I wasn't. None of what happened is guaranteed to repeat. The Atsuki I'd just been with couldn't exist anymore. But he could have disappeared because of something I'd done. After all, I would have vanished with him. I really wanted to find him again and get out. I tried to internalize that I'd never talk to him again, but I'd evidently failed, as I could feel relief when the people near the entrance met each other for the first time. For some reason, I'd seen him again, and he still had to be somewhere. It was possible to break free with him, which had felt impossible for the longest time. We were not in our original world, so even though we'd be stuck with different versions of ourselves, that really didn't matter. I couldn't tell what they were talking about, but they would soon search the whole building. That meant that I would eventually be found. I looked at my clothes. What the hell would I say if I was found? They'd immediately notice I wasn't the same person. I had less smoke on me and my clothes were different. I had a fairly absurd thought. I can enter the attic, so what if I put on clothes from there and when I'm found much later I'm making up an excuse like being too cold, or that my clothes were itchy or uncomfortable due to the smoke. Of course, that brought to mind the self of mine Atsuki had once seen. According to him, she'd been wearing clothes from the attic. This wouldn't make any sense. I'm not in that reality anymore. The person Atsuki saw can't be me. It's impossible. I had no idea how the universe worked. Was it remotely possible for me to go back to that world? It shouldn't have been, but if I could, I wanted to finish that circle. Once, I'd willingly abandoned that reality, but I'd slowly learned that it had been a mistake. What I still had there was not something I could leave behind. Didn't it work like this a few times on the 15th? If I go to the attic and put on the clothes from the wardrobe, what would the reason be? To hope I'll end up in that reality again, where a version of me with these clothes existed. That can't be, can it? It's what Atsuki and I talked about. It'd be an event with no origin. But the reason I just thought about changing clothes was to conceal myself as a part of this reality, not just to complete a loop where it had already happened. Could it be that I would have pursued that absurd idea if I hadn't known about the version of me that Atsuki saw? Naomi was just in the attic. On the 15th we found 2 dead versions of her, but that doesn't have to repeat. Everything could change. So thinking about returning to my original world should have been ridiculous, as it's long gone. But right now, I'm not there. And I can get the clothes that me was wearing. So, if they lead me back to that reality, it would explain why we still found them in the attic when they ran up. They'd never been taken out. I walked to the staircase. As the elevator should have been disabled, I went up on foot. The attic door was still unlocked. It was me who unlocked it. On the 15th, we couldn't get it open when we came across it because Naomi had shut herself inside. Since it hadn't been locked again, she must not have left yet. I slowly ascended the steps, unsure of what to think of Naomi. Was she behind the attack? Someone would soon try to kill her, So what would the motive be? I could see the light of the living room through the mildly open door. When I went still, the attic felt completely soulless. I finally took a glance at the room. I couldn't see anyone, so I had to step a little closer. When I did, it made no difference. Naomi wasn't there anymore. Just a few minutes ago, she'd been standing on the carpet looking at the suitcase, which had remained open on the soft cushion. Huh? Were my eyes deceiving me? Perplexed, I stepped onto the carpet. I recalled the first time I'd set foot inside. That time, an identical suitcase had been left on that couch, but it had been empty. That wasn't the case at the moment. There was not only one Sekimeiya in it, but a second. One of them was grey, whereas the other shined faintly. As I was staring at them, the disabled one became white. Why? Why are there two? I hovered my hand over the one on the right. Albeit very faint, I could notice its warm aura. That meant that I could touch it and travel right here. I couldn't fathom the sight. Why was there another Sekimeiya next to it? I remembered conversations I'd had with Atsuki regarding a second Sekimeiya. At some point, two must have existed, and it appeared they had since the very start. How would a second one come to exist? Due to one of them having been grey, I could tell it had been activated very recently. Naomi must have touched it and she appeared somewhere else. I looked down at the carpeted floor. Naomi's footprints ended exactly where I was. However, I couldn't help but feel something was very strange. Isn't this the opposite of what we saw? When we all entered the attic, her footprints began at the suitcase. Now they ended at it. And I already mixed mine with hers, because we're in the world where she went to it, and the other world was the world she went from it. There's like two realities we're jumping back and forth through, right? I think I've talked about this theory earlier, so let's just carry on. Let's not go over that again. Anyway, I forced myself to drop it. No matter what, two Sekimeiya were in front of me, so I nervously stared at them, knowing Naomi could be very close by. The existence of both Sekimeiya seemed ridiculous. One should have been on the crystal floor, and duplicating it had never sounded possible. However, it was very evident its powers went far beyond the mere time travel that we'd once learned about. Would they let me travel, or would they be denied again? I faltered, desperately trying to make up my mind. Why had Atsuki suddenly disappeared? He had to still exist. I wasn't in our reality, but was it really possible to return to it? If I travelled to the past right then, even if I appeared outside the tower, that Atsuki would likely not be there. The world was being constantly changed, and not only by me. To be back together outside, we needed to travel to the past at the same time. It was ridiculously frustrating. Was there really a reason why I was at the beginning of the incident? Would I be sent back to my reality if I merely followed some sort of destiny? These two Sekimeiya, this could be good. The existence of an extra one isn't known, and Naomi must have travelled somewhere thinking that she left the attic locked. If I had one of them, even if the group eventually comes across the other, they won't be aware of the one I have. Then I just have to find Atsuki and bring him to the Sekimeiya that will have gathered a lot of energy. That's how we'll be able to leave. Who knew of the second Sekimeiya? Was it only Naomi? On the 15th, she'd appeared from the lower floors, asking to talk to Katai privately. That might have been where travelling had brought her. I could be sure that the one that had been grey worked, so I grabbed it, avoiding direct contact. I knew very well about the lack of good hiding spots, so I wondered where to leave it. The storeroom's secret could have been known to some people and found at any time. Because of that, somewhere in the attic immediately seemed like the best option. I walked to the hallway and entered the rightmost bedroom. I stepped to the wardrobe, careful not to touch the gem. Once I looked inside, I remembered the two pieces of clothing Atsuki had pointed at. There were a white shirt and a dark grey pair of pants, larger than what I usually wore. There was nothing else I could have put on. I looked around me, wondering where to leave the Sekimeiya. Since I had to find Atsuki, I couldn't stay with it, but there weren't many places in the attic that could conceal things for long. The best I could think to do was to crouch next to the bed and let the Sekimeiya roll up to the wall underneath it. The door to the attic was still unlocked, so I had to hurry. I took off my coat and grabbed both pieces of clothing, sensing a bizarre surrealness as I put them on. Would that mere action guarantee my return to that world? There was nothing else I could do but to aim for that. Had the me that Atsuki had seen really been me after all? I tied my coat and old clothing around my waist together and exited the room. On the sofa, the other Sekimeiya still lay. What would happen to it? Would anyone find it before everyone entered the attic? We'd only be able to come in thanks to the keys on Naomi's dead body. Someone in the tower must have been plotting her death right then, so I needed to find her to see if I could prevent that. I locked the door with my key, then, going down the floors, I thought about something Atsuki had said after we'd met again. He claimed the recording was real. What the hell did that even mean? Did they spend an entire month here? There's no way. What had happened after my travel? The eyes he looked at me with had first been filled with suspicion, but why? Who could I have been if not the real Shiroya? It's going to be quite a few hours until the time he saw me with these clothes in hallway B. Will I be there by that time somehow? I knew my goals were slightly contradictory. After all, that reality wasn't where Atsuki and I was searching for was. However, if I really got there, I could show myself to the others as soon as I travelled to the paths from the bathroom. Then I would suddenly be the original me again. I went down the multiple staircases, feeling the odd touch of my new clothes. When I got to the last one, I noticed voices coming from hallway C. They quickly faded, and I realised the group was moving to hallway B. I silently looked past the grey door. Katai's still not with them. That must mean they haven't talked to the outside. Why is Katai not showing himself? It can't be that he's not here, can it? I could hear doors opening. The others were searching through hallway B. I knew they'd soon go up to the floors, so if I wasn't careful, I could easily be found. The storeroom and the attic were the only places where I could have been unreachable. Where could Atsuki be? Has it possibly went to the past and was teleported outside the tower? Even if that happened, would he not have entered it again? I suppose not if the incident had already started. When I was sure hallway C was empty, I stepped down and silently walked to A. Eventually, as I expected, the group came closer again. To avoid being seen, I hid myself in one of the crystal floors that had just been investigated, A5. It was the one that had just been hit by smoke, and I could see the gems were still missing. Okay, elevator? I recognised their voices, and the conversation they were having was very reminiscent of the one we'd once had. Seemed to be working. After noticing the elevator wasn't functioning, they loudly went up the stairs. As Katai wasn't with them, their pace was much quicker, and they didn't find the unlocked grey door odd. And they didn't find the suitcase in hallway C. On that day, we'd been beset with questions from the word go. Who had left the suitcase? What had caused the computer shutdown? After some time had passed, I exited the room. Was Atsuki there as well? Hiding like I was? Still puzzled by Katai's absence, I walked to the security room. The monitors should have been working, so I could look at the live cameras. Didn't, which guy was it? Akuro. He said something about, in one of these worlds, he was like, who's that? Who the hell's that guy? And he pointed at Katai. So one of these universes, Katai isn't at this event at all, so we must be in that universe, right? Huh? The door wasn't opening. It's locked. Why? As soon as I asked myself that, I knew the answer. The alarm had locked it. And Katai hasn't unlocked it yet. I suppose ultimately this proves he wasn't in the security room during the attack. Or could it be he's still currently inside? Only the shutter was in the lobby. At that time, no blood had been spilled yet, and the shining floor remained spotless. Let's hope it stays that way. Aside from the darker tone, the case was identical in hallway B. I looked up to the closest camera and confirmed no part of it had evaded the smoke. At first glance, nobody else was on the crystal floor. Atsuki? You here? Atsuki? My voice might have reached every place on that floor, but nobody was drawn to it. Naomi had to be somewhere too, but I wasn't sure she'd show herself to me. As I didn't want to be in the middle of the hallway, I walked toward a place I had to check. I entered the storeroom and rapidly closed the door behind me. The hidden wall was keeping the large corridor a secret, so I carefully felt it for the opening mechanism. After finding it, I slid it toward the wall and opened it with ease. I shut myself in. I couldn't believe that secret passage hadn't had any relevance during the day. It must have served a purpose, and it was likely someone else still in the tower knew about it. I couldn't feel completely safe there. After shutting the partition, the complete darkness returned. It felt familiar because that corridor was where I just entered the building from. I stepped up to the final door, or wherever it led. What? I couldn't see anything, so I blindly felt its surface with one hand. Something else was there. This is the handle. It hasn't been taken off. I gripped the freezing metal and turned it downward. Immediately, the door smoothly moved towards me, allowing bright light to illuminate the gloomy walls. Before the gap widened, I hastily closed it again. I'd seen white grass at my feet, and the surrounding mountains above. The door was not locked. Has the handle not been removed yet, or did it never happen this time? Puzzled, I tried to understand why stepping out of the building was possible. On the 15th, the handle had been taken off. When I'd entered the tower during the night, it had already been gone, so how could it possibly have been attached right then? There was a line of reasoning that made a bit of sense. In the morning of that day, we'd found a rusty key on the floor of hallway A. It was a key that I'd had in my purse at that very moment. After feeling its rough surface, I took it out and inserted it in the keyhole of the handle. Upon turning it, I'd locked the door. It really was for this door then. And we had found it very early in the morning, so it was likely the handle had been removed since the start. So why would it have been removed so early? Of course, to prevent us from leaving. But how would that have been done? After all, the alarm was supposed to be a secret. We didn't even learn what triggered it. Whoever took it off knew about this alarm in addition to the secret door's existence. Normally, I would assume the door was always taken into consideration for whatever the attack entailed. But the fact that it was open just now contradicts that, especially because when I entered the tower through it, the handle was already gone. I see. The handle was removed days before the 15th, but this didn't repeat this time. So the door is unlocked. Someone who had travelled far to the past must have removed the handle, aware of the alarm and secret door thanks to their future knowledge. That would be strange though. Did they see the handle removed before they travelled and then removed it in the past, making it a loop with no start? In any case, this isn't that same world. In this one, the handle wasn't taken off days in advance by anyone. I'm not sure what the cause of these differences is, but there is another major one that must be related. Katai's absence. He must not be in the building right now. In the past, I found the key to this door in his security room. On the 15th, we found it in hallway A, where he must have dropped it. Wonder why he didn't retrieve it. Was this all Katai's doing then? That doesn't make a lot of sense, but he had this key on himself. He was ready to leave through the door because he knew the alarm would go off and block every other method of escape. If someone hadn't removed the handle in the past, we might have never seen it. So what happened here? Did he leave right after the smoke was released? I wonder what this plan was really about then, because Naomi ran up with the Sekimeiya, well, with two of them. I still had no clue what the attack had been. I didn't know who was innocent and who wasn't. However, that wasn't the most important thing. What should I do now? Everyone can leave. Katai's not here, so they must not know what happened or how long they'll have to be here for. Was Katai behind all the deaths? Did he kill Naomi? If he did, they should all be safe. I didn't know what Naomi's intentions are though, and Katai also ended up dying in our world. But it wasn't so simple. If everyone left just like that, I wouldn't return to that world. The only way that could happen was by still being in the tower in the afternoon. What if Atsuki wasn't with me anymore? If everyone left, I'd finally cement a world with an extra version of myself. How would it happen? How would I ever return to that world? Just as I didn't know that, I had no clue how I ended up where I was. It was possible the world would morph as the hours went on. People would learn about time travel and eventually go back in time. Upon altering the past, the world's status would shift. It was a mystery how changes were applied, but what had happened on that day indicated that returning could have been feasible merely by letting the hours pass. I knew where two Sekimeiya were, and while it was possible, I could leave with them. It was incredibly risky. I had no way to know whether travelling to the past was still a good idea. I turned around and walked toward the partition wall. I thought I might have heard a sound coming from the hallway. I held my breath, staying as close to the wall as possible. The storeroom was uncomfortably cold, so I didn't directly touch the tile. And with that, we're going to wrap this episode up here because we're out of time for today. Great cliffhanger spot, once again, of course. You know me, I'm good at those cliffhanger spots. But, yeah, it's definitely seeming more and more like there's time travel, but there's also, like, interdimensional travel or, many worlds or something along those lines going on. Here we're jumping back and forth between two very distinct timelines or worlds or whatever you want to call it, where everything seems rigidly set in those worlds, but because they keep jumping back and forth between the worlds, it looks like everything's changing. Whether they can actually change anything, I'm not too sure, but it looks different because they're jumping from their world to this world where things play out differently. I don't know. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.